Well, howdy, and welcome back once again to the Withlacoochee River Report. Follow me through the intro and we'll get into the news. Well, as everybody knows, this week's news, I went and had my procedure done last Tuesday. It was a little painful at first, but not so bad that I couldn't function. I just really was in no shape to drive home, though. They do give you the good drugs once you get into the operating room. But as you can see, I made it through that. It's finally getting to be widespread knowledge that Round 2 Models has bought out Lionel. And, you know, as for Lionel being sold yet again, I have to hand it to them. At least this time they were sold to a model company. And, that's probably a good thing when you think about it. I'm just sitting here running a train today. This is the first time really I've been back out here other than to just come out and shoot a couple of shorts. Really, there's nothing else to really put into the report this week. Oops. Oh, did we lose it again? Oh. Damn. The direction switch ain't working too well. Well, let's see if we can make it work. There we go. Now, those two cars have KD couplers on them, so there was really no reason for them to come apart. Huh. And it's made it around there several times. Traction tires, I'm afraid, are gone in it. Huh. Don't know why those two cars came. Oh, I can see the couplers are a little uneven. Okay. Looks like I'm going to take the trucks off of that New York Central hopper and put a couple of washers under there to get it brought up properly. At least under one end of that hopper. Yeah, looks like it needs to come up by a couple of thousandths of an inch to get it correct. Anyway, now I think I reported this the last time. I got a board nailed in under there, or not nailed in, but hammered in. And I still I got to get another board in there like that toward the end to bring that corner up, because the buildings are still sitting a little crooked. Once I get that up, I can start planning on actually putting some scenery in over there. I probably should get around to getting the rest of this track work in up here before I bother with the scenery, though. But I'm kind of wanting to have some scenery on the layout here before too long. I want to get these buildings situated over here. Don't know how I'm going to set that up yet. Well, that's the thing. One of the things that's brought up, well, we'll come back to that in just a second. Okay, and there I am. One of the things that seemed to, and it's bugged me a little bit more recently. It seems like every time you turn around, everybody's calling all types of O gauge O scale. Come on, people. We know it's not all scale. All right. So let's go back through history and take a look at some of this. Okay. Back in the day, people like John Armstrong and Frank Ellison, those were O scale modelers who built their model railroads with a third rail. That third rail wasn't in the middle. You know, it was pretty well hidden, but that third rail was there. It's called outside third rail for a reason. That was the scale modelers trying to make their track work look more, look more realistic. They were scale modelers, and yet they were taking and running basically the a third rail because they felt that the AC power was much more, back in their day, was much more reliable than DC power. Yeah, I would say that maybe back then it might have been. I don't know. Direct current has always been fairly, well, direct for that matter. So they built their railroads to AC standards with an outside third rail. You had the high railers, which are typically your scale modeler, who wants to go ahead and use the Lionel track or the Gargraves track, and in this day and age, even the real tracks from MTH or the Atlas O track, which is beautiful track, no question of that. I think Atlas O charges you by the fraction of an inch on their track. About $10 for a fraction of an inch, seems like. They are expensive. Is it well worth it? Sure, for some, it probably is, for those that can afford it. For those of us who can't afford it, and I have to depend on finding my track out here in the real world, where real people live, I have to settle for whatever Lionel or Gargraves I can get. Then you had Gargraves track. Again, it has a center third rail. Now, Gargraves does make two rail track, or they did at one time. And their two rail track, it was made mainly for the trolley modelers or the traction modelers, especially if that traction modeler was going to pull his power from the overhead. So that's what that was made for. But it could be used with your standard O-scale two-rail operations. Two-rail has almost always been scale. There might be some things there that are not really perfectly in scale, but two-rail has always been scale. Back to the O-gaugers, back in the days when I was much younger, we considered the O-gaugers the Lionel people. Lionel didn't make that much scale stuff, and neither did K-Line at the time, which was this was the 1980s. And Williams wasn't known for having anything scale except maybe a diesel or two. Most of their stuff was traditional sized toy trains. They made money at it. Lionel, of course, was still under ownership of, that it was kind of like how Harley Davidson back in the early 70s was bought by a bowling ball company, AMF. Yeah, you had a cereal company that owned Lionel. Now, that says a lot about that. At least they had a little bit of free reign to try to bring out some decent stuff in their day. And they did make scale stuff. But the MPC era scale Hudsons and everything was pretty much, as far as the higher end stuff from Lionel back then, it pretty much was mostly post-war stuff in an after post-war era. So that was all after 1969. But you got people sitting there calling the out-of-scale stuff O-scale. It is not O-scale. It's O-gauge. The scale stuff was back in my day, you didn't look at a three-railer as being scale, period. There were probably, your high-railers were scale modelers and were running three-rail track. But your typical O-gauger was not a scale person. O-gauge was considered Lionel toy size. And in many ways still is today. Now, you notice you don't see too much of the gimmicky stuff on my railroad. You don't see a lot of animated toy things on my railroad. Even though I'll buy them and sell them, I don't have them on my railroad. You don't see the oversized switchman guy with his, coming out of his switch tower. You don't see the oversized this or the undersized that. I much prefer to have my stuff in scale. Today I would be considered a high railer. I do run two rail stuff on my railroad as well. So I do have two rail cars that they have two rail wheel sets. They are running KD couplers. I don't have too many of those at the moment. Now, you might be asking, well, why, if I was such an avid two-railer back in the day, am I not buying or searching for two-rail stuff today? Well, the reason for that is mail order has become so expensive. Yes, trains.com, spelled with a Z, sells a lot of two-rail stuff. Good, great for you. There's also a lot of other mail order firms that still sell two-rail O-scale. But if I could afford the item, I can't afford the shipping. Shipping has gotten so out of reason, especially in the last few years. Shipping has gotten just, it's gotten to a god-awful state. I don't know how they get away with it. Because it seems to me like it just isn't worth it. Then you're looking at some of the rolling stock. Well, while most of my rolling stock was right up there in price with any two-rail rolling stock, or would have been had I bought it new, I've got those four reefer, that four reefer set from Atlas O. Those cars, when they were brand new in the box, and you saw that some of them were, with the messed up couplers, were still $72 a piece. I paid $20. Not too bad. I got a good deal on them. I paid $20 a piece. That was still an $80 outlay that probably I couldn't really afford at that point. Most of my cars, especially the Weaver cars I bought recently, I paid $10 each for. Most of the old original Atlas cars I've got, I paid $10 a piece for. They're scale cars. So you notice I'm basically a high railer now. Is this something I would have done 20 years ago? Probably not. In fact, I remember at a meet with the Florida O-scalers, which was a two-rail group here in Florida. We had a meet up in Jacksonville. And because our head guy, of our group, it was actually an email group that was started. And when we did have a little bit of a show, we got up there, there were some things on display. There was some things for sale, but not much. But we had one guy there was saying, we've got a lot of rolling stock out there. And he was sitting there basically begging us, if you'll let us in, I said, well, here's the problem. You're opening up a can of worms there. I even spoke up to me and I said, you're really opening up a can of worms if you bring in a bunch of three-rail stuff. It might be scale size rolling stock, and that's all well and good. But then you've cracked the door a little bit. And next thing you know, you'll be having Mickey Mouse boxcars and Donald Duck cabooses. So you see, that's the stuff I don't care for. I don't want to see that when I go to a train show. If I see that, I'll go to another table. And if we're going to have an O-scale specific show, I definitely don't want to see that stuff. I guarantee you're not seeing that stuff at O-scale West. I can guarantee you're not going to see that stuff at the March meet in Chicago. Or the meet at Strasbourg. Or any of the other O-scale specific meets. Those are two-rail shows. There might be three-rail cars there now, but those three-rail cars are going to be accurate models that somebody is selling, and for you to basically convert it over to two-rail. Or at least that's the purpose of it. So, you got to keep that in mind. Calling everything in O-gauge O-scale take and drop the scale word and let's, be sure that we have traditional size 3-rail O gauge and full size O scale gauge, or scale O gauge, as we should call it. Because that's basically what I do, is scale O gauge. Like I said, I don't care for undersized cars, the S-gauge cars riding on O-gauge trucks. That was just a cheaper way of doing things back in the day. I know when it was brought out, it was for the kids. A lot of kids grew up with it. It's kind of like the old Lionel F3s from the 1950s. A lot of people love those F units. And they don't look bad in the paint schemes or anything, but they look inaccurate to me when I look at the detail. And that's not what I want to see. Yes, a lot of people grew up with it. A lot of people love them. A lot of people love 64 boxcars. I'm not one of them. And I would never call those cars scale, because they're not. So, with that in mind, let's remember the difference between O scale and O gauge and just plain traditional size toy trains. They're all toys when you think about it, because they are our toys as well. And we love them. But that's the way it is. So until next time, keep them cards and letters coming. Oh, another thing I wanted to talk about was YouTube. I recently started putting up a few shorts, and then I'm just totally shocked by the numbers of people that are seeing my shorts, the numbers of likes, and it's brought my subscriptions up by quite a bit. And I'm thinking, well, dang, I can't beat that, And so you'll see, be sure to get over there and view my shorts. And by all means, if you like the content, give it a like, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, I guess you could give it a thumbs down. I don't care for that much, but I know I have to take the criticisms like everybody else. So, until next time, happy railroading. Let's get this train going again. Come on.